And so we just got to like the 2-minute warning in the fourth quarter there. I want to cut out away from that film because I do want to talk about the struggles when it comes to end of game situations with McDermott this year. Because it just seems like they can't close a game out on the defensive side. And of course, injuries play a factor.
Yes.
You can't ignore those injuries, especially when you talk about the specific people, Milano, Daquan Jones, Trey White, the guys that were injured. And the roles that they played and the level of play they were playing at when they did get injured. So there's no doubt that's a factor, but it's so discouraging to see a defense in regulation. They're ninth in defensive EPA. They're ninth. They're a top 10 team on defense when it comes to regulation defense. But then
Even
when
with
they
all
get
the injuries, like that's on
even
the
with
year,
all the injuries,
so
yeah,
they weathered the storm enough.
yes, they do enough. There's enough variance there. There's some plays in there, especially when they're getting those turnovers. They're able to do some really good things. But when you look at 2 minutes left in the game into overtime, they go to a 29th ranked defense in EPA. So it's tough, man. It's been tough to again analyze this, and I'm sure this is the number one thing that they're studying in this week off, in their bye week. They're self scouting this because McDermott has just struggled to close out games. If we look at what the Patriots game, the Giants game, they got lucky. Let's be honest. They didn't even really close it out from a defensive standpoint in that game. The Broncos game, oh my God, I was there for that. It was horrible. And then this game. So, man, what are your thoughts on, the struggles of this defense this year? Obviously, injuries aside, what are some things that come to mind about their inability to really just close a game out on the defensive side?
The first thing that comes in my mind is, and you mentioned it a little bit. So the three big, we'll exclude the Giants one because the Bills won, but
Right.
well, I will at least. But like the three blown leads there at the end on those final drives: Patriots, Broncos, Eagles. Three completely different tiers of offenses, different styles of offenses, and the way the Bills lost against each of them just really signifies like ineptitude in those moments. Like it's not like, oh, well, all three teams are tremendous at this one thing. It looks like the Bills are vulnerable to this one thing. No, it's they lost in three different stylistic ways against the pass, against the run. It wasn't just one concept or one area of the offense or one specific gamed up scheme that they failed against. It was just an overall failure. And that signals to me, again, Eric, like with the theme we have here, an overall ineptitude in those moments where it's not necessarily because of this, the type of offense they're facing or the talent level that they're facing. It's more just the Bills themselves struggling in those moments. Because again, regardless of team, and it's almost kind of funny how it works out. Like the Patriots are a bottom level team, the Broncos are a middle level at this point, and the Eagles are top tier. So it's, you kind of got like a bit of representation from everyone all over the board in terms of who they struggled against and how they failed.
Yeah, and so if we had Adam look into this, it's something I was like, you know what, we need to start diving into this since it's the bye
Shout
week.
out to Adam. He's been going
Yeah,
crazy with the
he's
charts and
been
graphs.
crushing this thanks
Yeah.
to True Media. So he looked at the teams from 2020 on, and if they had a lead of 8 points or less with under 2 minutes to go, and you can see the Bills. If you look at defensive success rate, they're on the lower end, and yards per play surrendered actually on the lower end. So you're like, okay, they're completing some short passes. They're limiting those explosive, especially late in the game. That's kind of like what we expect from the Bills, right? Kind of limit those explosive, bend but don't break. But you can see the success rate there. Again, that's including this year. But if you go to the next post and take away McDermott's year as a DC, the Bills are actually not too bad. You see them; they're above the trend line right here in yards per play surrendered and defensive success rate. They're actually a little bit better. So you guys in the chat room is saying, well, they couldn't really close out things with Frazier. Yeah, I understand that, but they actually had a higher success rate on defense when it was just Frazier without McDermott's year. Obviously not complete yet, but still. And then Adam dove in even deeper about adding the playoff games. And he says yards per attempt increases, but success rate is still strong, one of the best in the NFL. So what's going on here? And that's the question. What's going on here? And so we attacked it from several different ways when it comes to the data, when it comes to the film. We're going to show you a little bit of both actually tonight, of course. And so I want to start off with, okay, I started looking at like, what's the pressure like? Like, what are they getting pressure? Are they blitzing more? McDermott obviously is more aggressive. than
Mhm.
Frazier was.
Mhm.
I mean, most people are, right? When it comes to defensive coordinators, like that's what we
Yeah.
wanted. Let's be honest. That's what
Yes,
we all wanted. That's
absolutely.
what we all wanted. That's what we asked for. So I started with that. So let's look at overall pressure rates from the Bills this year. And overall, this is regulation. This is not 2 minutes or less in overtime. So you can see the blitz rates are actually super low for the
Mhm.
Bills. So they're blitzing less, but they're still creating pressure and sacks. So you can see they're just under 40% pressure rate. So they're one of the higher teams when it comes to that. And their sack rate in regulation is 9.4%, 9.5%, which is, I think, fourth overall. So their
Mhm.
sack percentage is really good
Mhm.
when you're talking regulation. So you're like, well, then why do they struggle in the, late in the game and, in overtime? Well, here it is. So this is the pressure rates when there's 2 minutes or less and a team has 0 to 8, it's 8 or fewer points lead, right? So
Mhm.
the Bills are actually blitzing more. They're
Yep.
blitzing more and they're getting a slightly bump in pressure rate. So that when you blitz more, obviously, Anthony, that means you're sending an extra guy, which means what? In the late in the game, that there's more open space
Mhm.
underneath.
You have one less or minimum one less player out there in coverage to play against the route distribution. And the big thing too there, Eric, you have that sack percentage like in the notes of like it goes from 9.5%, which is fourth, to 2.4%, which is
Yes, thank you.
21st with 2 minutes left in the game. Yeah, that was a tremendous stat that you
Reiterate
pulled.
that. Reiterate that because that's
So
huge.
sack percentage, so again, of the like entirety, 9.5%, which is fourth in the league. It drops down to 2.4% with 2 minutes left and under, which is 21st. So they go from a 9.5% sack percentage to a 2.4% sack percentage with
Crazy.
2 minutes and below. And then you pair that with the chart that you showed, Eric, of they're starting to blitz more. So you're not really having an uptick in pressure. You're not getting home. You're also sending more people at the quarterback.
Yeah.
It's just basic math again. Like there's more space, there's one less player out in coverage. And we saw that again, this Eagles game, like I said, it's a fun microcosm and representation of what we've seen this year. But that's what really happened in the fourth and OT. Like you were just seeing, oh, here comes a Taron
Mhm.
Johnson blitz. Up, it's not getting home. Hurts dumps it down. There's space, 6 yards. Oh, broken tackle. Now it's 9 yards, 10 yards. You were just seeing the ineffectiveness in heating up the quarterback. And I'm not even talking about just getting sacks, like just generally heating up the quarterback, forcing him off the spot, having him to make a throw. The juice was not worth the squeeze when they were bringing pressure. And then they were getting gouged because they had less numbers in coverage.
All
And
right.
again, that what was happening then against the Eagles, it's not just in a vacuum against the Eagles. It's representative of what they've been on this year as
Yeah.
a whole.
And
And
you'll
it's
see it.
part
We'll
of the
show
reason.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, no
I
doubt.
mean, even
It's
to
not
look,
just
Eric,
game.
like, let's talk about the Broncos one, like the cover zero blitz, like they to
Yeah.
Jerry Judy, like,
Mhm.
and also to even, I don't even want to break that down that because I'm just going to get mad again. But like, that's a good example too. Like they
Yeah.
blitz and it like worked against them. And if you start to play, if you're thinking back to these drives, the Pats or the Broncos, the Eagles, start to think of the failures late in games or the second half as a whole and think about how much more blitzing you're seeing and the lack of effectiveness with it. And you'll start to kind of connect some dots and light bulbs will go off.
Yeah, and as you'll see later, more times than not, the Bills are sending 5-man pressures. So they're gonna send a Taron Johnson, they're gonna send a Micah Hyde or a Jordan Poyer. And usually, if they want to send two, if they send Poyer and Hyde or Poyer and Johnson, one guy's dropping out. And that's usually a defensive end. And so again, you're getting a defensive end in space. And usually and the Bills edges have been pretty good when you're talking Rousseau and Floyd about getting pressure, Epinesa. But now you're getting those guys out in space, which I get, but again, presenting different looks is great and sending and dropping guys, we're all about it. But in
Absolutely.
these moments, you're already struggling at the second level, so much so that you're having Jordan Poyer play backer
Yeah.
at times, right? And we've seen Neal there as well, in there for Dotson earlier in the year, as we showed you. We'll show you later. So again, now you're dropping a D end out and sending that guy. It just there's a lot going on, and I think that MO of aggressiveness of McDermott's really showing up even more so in those critical moments. And
Yes.
so, go ahead.
I got more notes. And then to tie into your Poyer point, because Rapp is out, no disrespect to Cam Lewis, but Cam Lewis is like the third safety that's on the
Hmm.
field. So now you're dropping known rushing quantities who have been working with Floyd, Rousseau, and Epinesa, and you're sending coverage guys, but then you're also weaker in coverage because if you're sending Poyer, you have Cam Lewis back there in coverage. So you've got less numbers in coverage and or less coverage specific players working with an overall like lack of depth
Mhm.
and lack of effectiveness. It's not too cute, but it's almost like you have to rein yourself in and be like, we don't have the horses for me to do this. Let me kind of just get
Mhm.
almost, I don't want to say this and have anybody get upset. You almost need to simplify it a bit more and just get back to your 4-man rushes and relying on those horses, because you don't have the horses on the back end and coverage to be able to get cute like that.
Right. And so now let's we looked at, the blitz rate, the pressure rate, and how that changes from regulation to the 2 minutes, a 2-minute drill there. So let's look at defensive rates overall. Look at the defensive success rate on the left, and then you got the first downs per attempt. And the Bills, they allow in regulation, they allow a lot of first downs per attempt. They're 25th
It's crazy.
overall. And even defensive success rate, they're kind of average defensive success rate at 14th overall. You can kind of see it there. So in regulation, hey, they do allow, guys to get first downs. There's no doubt about it. And it doesn't change when you're looking at it in the 2-minute area of the game. So now if we do look at that again, 2 minutes or less, including overtime, 0 to 8 point differential in the score. The Bills, once again, high first down per attempt rate. They're 27th overall, and just an awful success rate. It goes from 14th to 28th defensive success percentage. So it's really bad. It's under 40%. So they're not able to, stop these opposing offenses once, there's 2 minutes left in the game, and they're allowing a lot of first downs. I think they're averaging like 3.7 first downs in that range of 2 minutes or less with that score differential,
which is a lot
3.7.
for those of you playing at home.
31st.
That's a lot.
It's 31st. And think about that. A few first downs and they're already, in striking range. Yes.
Yeah.
And Adam brought up one last chart here. And he says how defenses defend a 1-score lead with 2 minutes or less remaining in regulation for this season. As you can see, the series conversion rate. So that's the amount of drives that are extended because of a first down or score. And the Bills, you can see where they're ranked. They allow the highest. So that is why the Bills defense has struggled, late in these games. And listen, I get it. And we're going to show you film more times than not. McDermott, especially the start, he plays pretty soft coverages, right? Bend but don't break. But then as those offenses dink and dunk their way down the field late in the game, you're playing Jalen Hurts. He's pretty clutch. They start dinking and dunking down the field. Then that pressure starts building up and he's like, I got to do something. He said it in his presser and it's going to stick with me for the rest of the year. When he was asked about that zero blitz against that empty look, and when they scored, the Eagles scored to win the game, he said, I felt like I had to do something. That right there that is exactly why you're seeing these numbers. Again, he lets it go. And don't get me wrong, he does change up some of the coverages and all that. He went to some man, he went some quarters.
They were playing 2-man. I was like, oh my God, 2-man.
Yep. And then what were they doing? They were just swinging it to the running back, and Bernard's out leverage. We're going to get to some of that. But that right there is what is in a nutshell has happened to this Bills defense late in games.
And it's been a gut punch. Like literally I can understand the Eagles one because the caliber team that they are. But when you are allowing these chokes to happen against the caliber of the Broncos, and I know where they are in kind of middle tiering now, but that loss still should not have happened. The Patriots one is the most egregious. And
yes, because he blitzed like 65% of the time against Mac Jones there. Again, we're going to cover some of that, but it's like, come on, man. Like, was that needed?
No. And Eric, these are some numbers too, like real quick that I gave you offline before we went live. Like, so the graphs and charts and what we're just showing right now, like speaks to like the very like late game scenarios and situations, but second half versus first half differences, there's some pretty stark differences in stats. So the Bills defense on the year against the run in the first half, they are second in rushing EPA and first in rushing success rate. In the second half, they're 30th in rushing EPA, 29th in rushing success rate. They just get gouged on the ground in the second half. And it's not opponent specific. It's just on the year. There's also a drop when it comes to success rate against the pass, 15th in the first half against passing success rate, 20th in success rate against the pass in the second half. So only, a 5-spot drop, but They're a little worse against the pass in the second half, significantly worse against the ground in the second half. And when you're adding all of that together with what we've done so far, Eric, it just continues to paint this picture of a lack of adjustment, teams figuring things out and really starting to gouge you in certain areas. And I wanted to bring up the run piece because it was so significant in this game against the Eagles. Like the Eagles just really leaned into the ground in the second half, and the Bills just did nothing to combat it.
Yeah, and that's surprising when you talk about those numbers because it
Right.
felt like early in the season, everyone was complaining that they would get slow out of the gates.
Hmm.
And so to hear some of those numbers, especially the run game, and yeah, if you're just looking at the numbers, to me, it's like, why is that happening? Because the offense that you're playing is adjusting, but are you as a defense adjusting? It doesn't
Yeah.
seem like that's happening, especially when you're talking about the actual run game.
Oh, thank you very much for the super chat, Bill's Witch. Thank you very much for being here in general, but also for the super chat. And the comment is someone needs to tap their index finger on their temple and stare straight at McDermott.
Yeah.
Yeah, these struggles, Eric, are gonna continue to kind of fall at his feet and fall onto his shoulders, however you want to place it or where you want to place it. And yeah, just with the theme of what we were doing in this episode, and you and I are looking at the charts earlier today,
Mhm.
and so that's what kind of spurred me to be like, oh, I want to take a look at some first half or second half specific
Yeah, I
things. And
love it.
I was even surprised, like, to see that significant of a drop off against the run and even the pass a little bit, but more against the run. All of it just again points to a lack of adjustment, a lack of effectiveness. And again, not to give him a pass, the injuries are a significant piece
Oh yeah,
of
we're gonna
that.
outline that. There's
But
no
but
doubt.
but but also that, Eric, ties into what we said earlier a little bit, where it's not fair really, but you still have to be able to correct for that in some degree. Like maybe you reduce how complex you are. Maybe you reduce some of the looks or coverages you're sending because you don't have the personnel to be able to execute it at the level you need to. And here's a blitz right now from Taron Johnson. Oh, this one got me because he was so close, but the
Yeah.
running back just gets a piece of him.
Yeah, and so, again, we're under 2 minutes here in the 4th quarter, 1st and 10 situation. This is a
This is
9-yard
this
gain.
is the first. This is the very first play of that Eagles drive that goes down to tie the game with the field goal. This is the
Yep.
first play right out of the gate.
Right, and so, the Bills send a 5-man pressure, so they're dropping Jordan Poyer out, they're dropping Leonard Floyd out, playing Palms coverage, 3 over 2 to each side, 2 by 2 formation, and they're sending Taron and they're sending Bernard, and, yeah, Taron Johnson's coming from, left field, basically, so it takes a few minutes to get there, and right here, Hurts almost pulls it down and
Yeah.
ends up wanting to take off, but he stays in there, and then A.J. Brown to the bottom of the screen does a good job of creating some separation, some space with a little push off, and then
Mhm.
Hurts just resets and fires it down there. So again, you're sending a 5-man pressure, and this has been Anthony. We've talked about this since the Jags game. You're sending these blitzes, and they're not affecting the quarterback. So
Yes.
at some point, you got to say, "Hey, I understand you want to pressure the quarterback, affect him to get the ball out, but look how much time he still has to make this throw down the field for a 9-yard gain."
And we've shown some really successful blitzes, even against, and I know people say, well, it was against the Jets, but even against the Jets last week, so as recent as the previous week, Sean McDermott has had successful 5 and 6 man pressures. Granted, a bunch of them have come with Matt Milano and Daquan Jones on the field.
Right.
But it's funny you mentioned the Jags game because this is the first thing that came into my head seeing this play. And this rush and like the lack of getting home and the spacing for it and the time it takes, like you'll see it creep up a bunch in this game. That was exactly where my head went to first. I was like, it's like the Jags game all over again. You're sending pressure almost like you're sending it just to send it because Taron
Right.
Johnson has to come from so far away. And, again, kudos to Kenny Gainwell for getting enough of a piece of Taron Johnson to be able to give Hurts that time. But just from a probability standpoint, that's not really going to get home to you. Like Hurts is in the middle of the field. Taron Johnson's coming from like almost by the numbers in the slot. Like that's a big ask to expect him to get home and heat up the QB.
Right. And so now we fast forward to the next play, 121 left in the game, 1st and 10 situation, and you get an 11-yard gain. So again, completing those passes, but not in that low end of yards per attempt, in yards per completion, like we've seen in some of those, like we saw in some of those charts. But watch, they drop out into that too high shell, and there's no pressure. And I talked about it earlier. There's no pressure up the middle. And one thing I want you guys to start paying attention to, and it's something again, we wanted it. We wanted to see Greg Rousseau at defensive tackle. We
Mhm.
wanted to see him. But when you look at some of the power that the bigger guys at defensive tackle can generate to push the
Mhm.
pocket, like you saw with Jordan Phillips, you're just not getting that with Rousseau. And so now that pocket, look at the pocket. Like there's the interior of the pocket. We always talk about interior offensive line are responsible for the depth of the pocket, and then the tackles are responsible for the width. Like there's no pressure here up the middle, and Jalen is able to see the entire field, and he just runs. Man, this route concept is never going to leave us either. He's got that too high
levels, friggin' levels.
Yeah, the one that the Bills spam right here and right here. And AJ Brown, he uncovers. There's no pressure. It's an easy pitch and catch for 11 yards, and then the Eagles are once again moving the chains.
It's so funny that you said that because like even when I was watching the tape and I saw this, I was annoyed at the lack of pressure. And then I was like, oh, levels. Like, of course, like just kill me twice on this play. Thank you so much. But yeah, you nailed it. Like it's there when the Bills were getting that muddle rush early in the game, they weren't just like kind of sitting at the line or sitting too far back. Like they were controlling the width. They were driving guys into the backfield. They were creating some sort of displacement. And you don't have that here. Like you've got a nice, comfortable pocket for Hurts. Vaughn gets run right around the arc. You're not getting any compression from Leonard Floyd on the outside. He's getting pushed upfield by Jordan Mailata. And then, yeah, there's nothing on the inside from Rousseau, and Oliver knocks Dickerson back a little bit, but then Dickerson anchors and that's it. Yep. Settles and got nothing. And then AJ Brown just has a ton of space because again, the Bills are playing softer and playing off. And it's just a bad giving up space in coverage and also not getting pressure is literally like the worst combination you can have on defense. And
yeah, right.
The Bills had it a lot in this game.
So we're going to fast forward a little bit. So still in the fourth quarter, 58 seconds left in the fourth quarter. 2nd and 4 here. Here's an 11-yard gain, easily moving it down the field. And what do you know is happening? Against the Eagles, it was these field blitzes. So when they send 2 guys off the edge, it was from the field. And if you guys don't know that, when defensive coordinators are setting up their game plan and blitzes, sometimes they're field blitzes, sometimes they're boundary blitzes, sometimes they want to attack the running back side of protection, like you see here. For the Eagles game, most of the blitzes came from the field. So you see that to the top of the screen. So with those 2 guys coming, that means Epinesa and Poe are dropping out underneath. Again, Palms coverage 2x2 or 3/2 to the top, 3/2 to the bottom. And again, Hurts is seeing it. There's no pressure. Look at the pocket. It's an easy pitch and catch for Devontae Smith. And then boom, there's another 11 yards.
And this one, I don't hate the idea of this. And we've seen AJ Epinesa have a pick 6, like dropping into coverage. Like he's been athletic at times. I don't like this because of the situation. It is 2nd and 4. And Devonta Smith literally just hitches it up at 5 yards, like 1 yard past the sticks. I love simulated pressures. I love creepers. I think being able to disguise your front and lean into that type of pressure package is hugely important for defenses in today's NFL. But the situational use of it here, I don't like the call. Like it's easy for, again, Devonta Smith to just hitch up. Hurts is in rhythm and good timing and just fires it to him. There's nothing that he doesn't have to wait for anything to develop downfield because it's 3rd and 9 or something like that. And it doesn't really give the pressure a chance to get home because it's such a short down and distance. Hurts literally catches this ball, like hits a couple steps and fires it out. Like it's a bad timing for this call and also like combined with the lack of just overall individual effectiveness up front. Like it's just bad timing, bad execution, bad call, all of it.
Yeah. And again, they saw this several times in this game. There's Kelsey identifying the Mike, the Bernard right there. So they know they're going to slide to that side with the guys coming off the edge, and it's picked up rather well. It's picked up rather well from the field. There it is. You got 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, guess what? All covered, all bases covered. All right. Here's your contained player. Again, you're not getting that push up the middle. He's got a really nice sight line. Look at the field. Like he can see the entire field from here. And it's a short pitch and catch, but it's just so obvious. And so now we're going to kind of get into similar situations and the game scenarios under 2 minutes with the Bills up in these games and the opposing offense is driving down there. We're going to show you these plays. So on this play, and more times than not in this game, it was a boundary blitz. So Hyde and Poe are blitzing, as I have outlined there. And now you're dropping Floyd again, one of their best pass rusher, probably off the edge.
Absolutely.
And it's picked up by that 4-man slide again. And then you're getting a pass over the middle for a 14-yard gain. And look at it from the end zone angle. I mean, Mac Jones versus cover 3. Here's Floyd underneath. Here comes a crosser. So he hits him. Well, it's a high-low. Well, you have the tight end behind him. AJ Epinesa isn't quite able to get there. The pass is completed for 14 yards. And so, again, it's a different coverage. It's not the Palms coverage, more that too high shell coverage. It's a cover 3, blitz. So it's 3 deep, 3 under, and they're able to hit the high low over the middle.
Yeah, just another example of, pressing these buttons and having them not work out. And especially with what the Patriots do here, like they keep 6 in to protect with their offensive lineman, and then they have Ramondre Stevenson as well. Like you're almost better off just rushing 4, making them waste that man, like showing this look, but it's 3rd and 8. Show them this look, drop out, make Mac Jones, especially for a quarterback like Mac Jones who struggles with his decision making, who struggles with his reads. Like again, a different tier, a different caliber of offense. Like, but you're still treating it with your same blanket answer, regardless of opponent. And
Mac
Eric,
Jones picked this. He literally saw it coming. Look,
bro,
he's pointing
yep,
it out. He's letting them know, hey, Poyer's the mic. That's who we're working to. So these 4 are coming. It's obvious. It's 3rd and 8, and they're showing it almost probably too soon. And so that the offensive line and the running back, they know 4 on 4. It's easy pickup. I mean, I know Epinesa gets the edge, but still, I mean,
it's an
Mac
easier
Jones pick up on it.
They gum it up. And so that was my bigger takeaway. And you started to talk to it. Like they're not holding that initial look long enough and then bringing the blitz. Like it's just ineffective. Like it's allowing things to be easily diagnosed because of their alignment. And then also because they continue to use these type of looks. And there's another one with Greg Rousseau at defensive tackle. Again, ineffective in that spot. He's also, again, like he's playing on a stub of a foot with what he's got going on, and he's grinding through. But again, it's just stuff that's easily able to be identified by the center or by the quarterback, being able to be picked out, being able to be made ineffective with what you're doing. And then Eric, like we said, like if you're bringing the blitz and you're not getting home, you have less numbers and bodies and coverage. And not to mention with this specific type of rush, not only do you have 6 in coverage instead of having potentially 7, one of those 6 is Leonard Floyd. So you've got less numbers in coverage, and one of those lesser numbers is an edge player. So you're almost losing like 1.5 times there. It's just, again, like overall ineffectiveness patterns week after week in these similar type of moments.
Right. And another situation, this time from the Giants game, 4th quarter, 58 seconds left in the 4th quarter, 3rd and 2 situation. This is only a 3-yard gain. But again, this is that cover 3 boundary blitz against the Giants. And watch how quickly when Hyde and Neal blitz and putting Bernard and Miller underneath here, look at the leverage. I mean, this is easy leverage win for the running back. And here's a wide receiver. There's a corner. I mean, there's too much space. There's too much space on a 3rd and 2 situation. And you're bringing the blitz. Why wouldn't you be up closer near the line of scrimmage in these type of situations? I understand you want to run zone blitzes. Like, that's fine. That's kind of at the heart of what McDermott wants to do. But you're losing leverage. And you talked about not having the horses in Milano and the Daquan Joneses of the world. Like, if that's the case, you need to close passing windows and play a little tighter and then bail. Play up and then bail, because you're just making this too easy. And Saquon Barkley's able to out leverage Bernard and the corner there, and he's converting. And that's why the Bills are 2nd worst team when it comes to series conversion rates on defense.
The pass rush and what's happening up front is not merging or marrying well with what's happening on the back end. Like you are like the whole idea there is to like get quick pressure on Tyrod and like get home or force him into
and
a
they
bad
got free
throw.
rushers. Yeah.
Yes, they did. Like, so imagine, Eric, what would happen to Tyrod Taylor if, I don't know, Christian Benford was up on the line on his man, or like Bernard was up and a little bit closer. Like maybe this gets dumped down and it's a tackle right away and it's a gain of 1 or a gain of no gain. Instead, like you were blitzing to either get home to the quarterback or heat him up. They do heat him up, but you didn't cover the friggin' guy that he would outlet it to. Like, so it nullifies what you're doing up front because you've given so much space and you've out leveraged yourself and allowed him to find an easy answer. This isn't like, well, Tyrod went from 1 to 4 really quickly and figured it out and processed great. Like, no, this is him just. Yep, he had the answer right away. Like your plan on the back end is not matching the plan up front. And if you have that disconnect, it can hurt you. And when we've seen the Bills defense falter, it's been when that plan on the back end and the front has not worked. Eric, you talked about it in the individual episode you did after the Dolphins, and we talked about it in the film room. To start that game against Miami, the pass rush plan and coverage was not working well together. Then they tweaked some things, and it was a beautiful marriage the rest of the way, and it was the reason they shut down that Miami offense. But it's easy for a pass rush plan and coverage plan to not be in sync and work well together, and that's what we're seeing here.
Yeah, and this is the last play of the defensive side of the breakdown. And you talked about the injuries, like not having Milano has been huge. Obviously, so much so that they've obviously put Poyer in there at times. We saw Williams play a little bit. They had Saran Neal early in the year, so you see Neal in on this play. You also have Rousseau again at the defensive tackle spot. I think they need to scale that back. To your point, he's been doing it even when he's been injured, but sometimes if you're only rushing 4, you have to affect the middle of the pocket, and they have not been able to do that with Rousseau consistently. So quarters coverage look, empty set, and to the weak side of the formation, you're going to have your linebacker more times than not. This would be a Milano. This would be a Dodson or a Poyer. Here it's Neal, and they're just running a high-low. So they're doing that little whip route to the boundary, and then they're getting that in-breaking route to Jalen Hyatt. On 4th and 5, they're able to get 12 yards. This is one of those plays I talked about earlier, one of the highest EPA plays in that 2 minutes or less situation. And this is one of the higher EPA plays gained by the opposing offense. And it was on a critical down, a money down 4th and 5, and they're able to get 12 yards here over the middle on the high-low. And so I ask, if Milano's in there, 1, are they running the same coverage? 2, is he going to bite on that whip route, or is he going to be a little more disciplined because he's taking the reps in here and he's going to deter that route in behind him?
Yeah, and so this is, where things start to come full circle, and that apex defender, this time it's Saran Neal instead of being Tyrell Dodson, but it was Dodson on that 3rd down and 3 against the Eagles that Devonta Smith hitched up on, and this time it's Saran Neal on a 4th and 5, so different down, but very similar distance. But again, that same area of the field being manipulated, or that same player being manipulated this time in a different way. Like, you were attacking that apex defender. This time it's Saran Neal. He gets pulled out by that whip route. Look at the window. Like, that is huge. Bernard is influenced on the inside by Waller, and then Hyatt's able to just come around the back end, and there's just a huge window for Taylor. And again, it's just,
and I'm glad you mentioned Bernard, because this is their trap side. So it's the 4/3 side. So they have to trap this guy. Usually Waller, if he's running an out route, you're going to have Taron Johnson trapping it. Well, if that guy runs like a stick route or curl or crossing route, that's Bernard's guy. So that's why you see both of those guys kind of hugging Waller on top of, hey, it's Darren Waller. But that's why you see that. And that's why Matt Milano is so freaking important against these empty sets on the weak side of the formation. With him not in there, this window is a lot bigger. Again, he's been in this defense. He's played in this coverage. He's made interceptions in this coverage. The Titans game last year, he took it to the house. The very same coverage. Like, it's not having him. Of course, it's a huge factor. And when you have Neal there just trying to do his best to stay with that whip route, when really he should be just settling in right in there and hopefully deterring the play. But again, this is one of those plays where, the not having Daquan Jones there, not having Matt Milano there, lead to a 12-yard gain on 4th down.
Yeah, and it's at a certain point, you're waiting for it to kind of affect this team like further. When you lose top tier players that also play premium positions, it's really hard to overcome that. And when you're also, kind of inept at in-game adjustments and self-diagnosing in-game and figuring things out, it puts you into a spot where you can be gamed up. And I mean, here's
one more. This is the last one.
Here's again, another. This is also going to make everybody think that the Bills suck at quarters and they should never run like a variation of it. They should never do anything with it. But again, like, what's being gamed up? Like, you've got that into the boundary side, which effectively functions like man coverage with Christian Benford in Meg again against the single receiver and Devontae Parker, which means Dodson is responsible for Ramondre Stevenson. And that's a matchup you'll take 10 out of 10 times. Ramondre, any running back out of the backfield against Terrell Dodson in space.
Yeah. Again, when a lot of times what to do, this 3-by-1 set, 3 to the field here, isolated receiver and a running back, is they just lock it. We talked about it earlier. They just kind of lock it there. And so again, Milano typically would be one-on-one with Stevenson, a pretty good receiving back. Well, it's Dodson here, and it's a nice move from Stevenson. Thankfully, Dodson does trip him up, but this is another one of those EPA plays. It was one of the higher ones in these situations late in the game, 28 seconds left in this one. And the Patriots are able to drive down there because, again, some of the plays that we've broken down, it's just it's been tough, man. I went back and watched all this film on these situations, and we pulled some of those numbers. It was discouraging to say the least, but I do believe that Sean McDermott and his staff are also doing the same thing. In fact, they've
Mhm.
probably already done it already. And I expect them to tweak some of these things. Again, maybe you're not putting in certain formations, you're not putting Dodson, locking him on the backside against a running back. That doesn't make sense. Why would you do that? So I think some of those tweaks and adjustments will take effect when it comes to after the bye week against the Chiefs and going forward. But they also need to be able to do those type of tweaks at halftime within a game from the drive to drive. Like they need to do a better job of doing that. And maybe it has something to do with all the things that McDermott has to worry about as a head coach. Well, he needs to start, kind of delegating some of those things then because
Mm.
they need to work together more. Maybe some other coaches and assistants need to step up a little more to help him with some of these things because he can't be everywhere at once.
And that's we talked about it a little, and I don't think everything is, can be explained away by him having a double duty, but that's a
Yeah.
legitimately like hard thing. It's hard to be, a head coach and also be like the play caller offensively or defensively, which again, like we've talked about, Eric, it's part of the reason. Like Andy Reid, who does he have on defense? Steve Spagnuolo. Oh, Zach Taylor for the Bengals. Who does he have on defense? Lou Anarumo. Like you've got guys that, if you're owning a side of the ball, you have someone on the other side that almost can kind of live in their own world as a head coach, quasi head coach and run that side. So you are alleviated to a degree. And obviously with what the Bills had on offense this year, that's been the antithesis of that.
Right.
So like if ever there was a year to have questions on the offense, this year would be the worst because Sean McDermott has taken over as defensive coordinator. Like this was the year where you needed, the bows to be nice and neat and tidy on the offense so that Sean McDermott didn't have to wear all these different hats and kind of function in multiple ways. And we haven't seen that. That makes his job even harder. And then also too, like with this Eagles game, again, coming off of it, the Eagles are a really good football team. They're really well coached. They have tremendous players. So, like,
Hmm.
it's already hard enough without getting yourself boxed into these areas. But I also think, too, like, the Eagles boxed you into some of those areas with their talent, with their scheme, and their ability to win and kind of game them up a little bit. But it's when you connect those late game failures with the rest of the season, like we showed, then it starts to show that, okay, it wasn't just because the Eagles are a good football team schematically and talent wise. It's because some of this has to do with the patterns we're seeing on the defense for the Bills.